And now we have an interview with David Adler. It is a pleasure that you have this time with us and you are now with us in this moment and in this interview. How are you?
Very well. I'm very happy to be with you, tuning in live from here in the very center of Washington, D.C., across the street from the White House, at the National Press Club, where we have just concluded the fourth sitting of the Belmarsh Tribunal, a people's tribunal to hold this government here in Washington, D.C., accountable for the crimes it has committed in adventurous wars abroad, as well as with respect to press freedoms and the First Amendment, of which the case of Julian Assange is a landmark in terms of the audacity of the Joe Biden administration to continue enforcing this assault on press freedoms and this utter disregard for the rule of law as it applies to whistleblowing and the exposure of truths by journalists and publishers around the world.
Okay. And as you said, this Friday was this kind of court. So as this event organized by Progressive International in which you participated was held, the Belmarsh Tribunal dedicated to Julian Assange. Who was present, and could you tell us about the symbolism of this tribunal, and do you consider that these objectives were or are being achieved?
So the Belmarsh Tribunal takes its inspiration from the Russell-Sartre tribunals of the 1960s and early 70s, which sought accountability and justice for the crimes of the U.S. government in the war in Vietnam, when no international authority, no international court would hold that government accountable. The Belmarsh Tribunal, which is named for the maximum security prison where publisher, WikiLeaks journalist Julian Assange is currently being held, has been held for the past few years under threat of extradition to the United States, aims to do a similar distribution of justice, turning the tables on the Espionage Act, turning the tables on the extradition case to say it's not the journalists and whistleblowers who should be put in prison, it's the people who are committing the crimes that are exposed by those journalists and whistleblowers. So today here in Washington, D.C., we had a very esteemed group of human rights defenders, journalists, and publishers, ranging from Professor Noam Chomsky, you heard from earlier, to whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, to UK parliamentarian Jeremy Corbyn, speaking out about the ongoing assaults on the First Amendment, which is supposed to guarantee certain rights to freedom of expression and publication, as well as the more global stakes of that conflict in the erosion of democratic institutions that is accompanied by the inability for citizens, not just here, but around the world, to tell the truth and to reveal the secrets of the powerful for threat of lifelong imprisonment and sometimes execution in the case of countries that are more advanced on this track of assaulting those fundamental freedoms of expression and publication.
Yeah. And what are the main actions that you as a focus coordinator in this meeting, in this court, as is we can say it like that, what are the plans in the long and short term in this case, in this situation?
I think a global consensus is forming around the urgency of the Julian Assange case in particular as a kind of canary in the coal mine for the status of press freedoms around the world. We recently saw a very inspiring tour of the WikiLeaks crew meeting with President Gustavo Petro in Colombia, meeting with the new president Lula da Silva in Brazil, meeting with Alberto Fernandez in Argentina, and meeting with the Mexican president Andrés Manuel López Obrador, all of whom have expressed their profound concern around the issue of WikiLeaks and the imprisonment of Julian Assange. The reason why we're here in Washington, D.C. is because the United States, even the Congress people who are considered to be more progressive, more human rights oriented, have been slow to join that global campaign. So we're here to apply pressure to our friends and allies, as well as to the White House across the street, to say the whole world is watching this case, and we understand the stakes that it implies for the status of journalists and free expression around the world. And it's time to turn back the extradition proposal by the Trump administration and enforce and drop the charges against Julian Assange. And that's why we're here today at the National Press Club.
In the last part that you said that you are trying to put the pressure for the freedom on the release and the justice in Julian Assange case. What do you think is the message that the U.S. is given by the pressuring and the imprisonment, not in the U.S., because it's not in the U.S., and even the extradition of a person of Julian Assange for revealing the secrets that the U.S. government is trying to keep hidden?
There are two key messages of the tribunal today. One key message is a simple petition to respect the letter of the law and the U.S. Constitution. So these sustained violations of the First Amendment, of a Constitution that our leaders, our representatives, claim to hold dear, we are only asking that they respect the same document that is foundational to this democracy. But there's a second question, a second petition, and a second plea from this tribunal, which is to respect the implications of the violation of that First Amendment. And the implication is that if the U.S. government can imprison a non-U.S. citizen for violating what it determines to be, through the Espionage Act, an issue of national security, what does that mean for even U.S. journalists who are operating around the world and reporting for U.S. publications? What would this government think? What would the U.S. American people think if foreign governments were jailing, prosecuting, indicting journalists for doing their jobs, telling their truths, exposing key secrets that are of importance to the public interest in foreign countries? I think we can all imagine what the reaction of the U.S. American public and the Biden administration would be. It would be horror, it would be to cry injustice, and it would be to demand the return of those citizens to their home countries, not so that they can be persecuted and prosecuted for those suspected crimes. And so that was the key message that came out of this international tribunal, with members ranging from India to the United States to Italy through Latin America, raising the voice of that global community in defense of press freedoms under assault around the world.
Yeah, and that's not a secret that no, the acts of crime that the U.S. have been doing during all this time, because it's not a secret all over the world. It's a truth. It's a reality. But before we conclude in this meeting, we would like you to refer to the general objectives that the Progressive International is pursuing in 2023.
Our mission as the Progressive International is to build a powerful common front in defense of these basic values of democracy and decency, of plurality and a more egalitarian society. Every day, we just saw this insurrection in Brasilia that had such was so memorable from the recent riot right here in Washington, D.C. And that revealed to us the power of the international networks that are linking the forces of the neo-fascist right, who wish to repress minority communities, who wish to erode the institutions like the freedom of expression and our ability to hold power and wealth to account. Our mission, whether it's to do with public freedom of expression and the freedom of the press, or whether it's to do with corporate crimes in terms of environmental degradation, in terms of wage theft, in terms of the litany of crimes committed by the rich and the powerful and the corrupt, our job is to bring together progressive forces around the world in common campaigns that can hold those forces to account. Because what we lack today is the infrastructure to link these forces across borders with the strength and coordination and courage of our increasingly radical right-wing enemies. And that's our mission that we're taking into 23. And I hope that the listeners and the viewers of this program join us on that mission and help fortify that common front in defense of these common values.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Adler. It was a pleasure to share with you these minutes. Thank you for being with us. And now